Earlier this week, residents in several parts of the Western of Johannesburg, including Roodepoort, felt a tremor. On Wednesday night, the Council for Geoscience confirmed that a magnitude 3.62 tremor was recorded. So is this becoming a common occurrence? Let's find out with Willem Meintjes, who is with the Council for Geoscience, for more insights. Thank you for making time for us, Willem. What do we know about this latest earth tremor? What triggered it?
Thank you, and good afternoon, Clement, and to all the viewers. So we know, especially on the West Rand region of South Africa, so that's typically the western parts of Soweto towards Roodepoort, that sort of region of Johannesburg and the broader areas. It had a long standing history of mining in that region. So we know it's a well-known fact that in some cases there are mining-related seismicity. So sometimes it can be as a process of active mining that's occurring, or it can be also as a result of changes in the underground stress conditions post-mining as well. So we know that's a typical one of the contributions to seismicity. The central parts of Gauteng in the broader Johannesburg region do experience very low levels of natural seismicity from time to time. And then also, you'd recall the event that happened in June, especially towards Ekurhuleni. There are those instances as well, where we know that fluctuating water levels can also enhance the occurrences of seismicity in some instances.
Yeah, and speaking of the other events, I mean, you mentioned that other tremor in July. There was another one in June. It looks like they're becoming regular. Is there some explanation to that?
So what we've observed with so we've deployed mining cluster networks, what we refer to as them, so to monitor seismicity on a slightly more regional scale than what the mining companies would traditionally have their equipment deployed in their operations. So as the Council for Geoscience, we monitor seismicity broadly across mining regions. And what we've observed from the data that we've collected now over at least the last 10 years is that the trend of seismicity, especially in the West Rand region, seems to be quite consistent. There doesn't seem to be any significant trends that indicate increases or decreases in seismicity in that specific region. So the largest event that we've recorded with our network up to date in that area now had been a magnitude 4 event in the past, although we cannot rule out to say that is with certainty the largest magnitude type earthquake that we can expect in that area. Mm-hmm. So the typical size earthquake that the residents in that region experienced now on Wednesday evening, that we've confirmed it now subsequent to analysis as a magnitude 3 event. So generally, we don't expect large-scale damage to infrastructure from events of that magnitude.
Yeah. So there are obviously hotspot areas for these seismic events, and mining, as you've said, also triggers more of these events. Just help us understand practically what the link is between mining activity and earthquakes. What happens geologically?
Yes. No, that's a good question, and from our understanding, it remains a difficult thing to predict, so we can't predict any earthquakes. But we do know what happens is over geological time, what we refer to, so this is over a period of millions of years, when geological processes happens, what we typically find is that historical, what we refer to as stress conditions in the rock sort of get locked into the rock mass. And then once mining operation starts to happen, there's a tendency of either one of two things that can happen. So on the one side, it can be because of that excavation and exhuming volumes of materials from the underground in the mining process that can cause a release of that energy in terms of seismic energy. Then we have earthquakes. And then in other instances, we also have what we call geological structures. So these are your fault lines and your dikes that do occur naturally as a part of the geological process. And sometimes they can also build up stresses or become lubricated, as we sometimes refer to that, by groundwater movement as well, that can, sort of cause the rock mass to slip and then release that seismic energy. Mm-hmm. So in the main, those are the two induced sort of contributions of seismicity from a mining perspective.
Yeah, but we haven't really experienced, suppose, many intense seismic events, have we? We had one, I think, in 1969, which was quite significant, and then the one in 2014, which left one person killed. Some people were injured, some infrastructure damages as well. But generally speaking, we've been experiencing low to moderate seismic events. Is there a reason for that?
Yes. So South Africa, if you look at it from a global perspective, geographically where we are located and geologically sort of the controls surrounding South Africa, we are located in what we call an intraplate region. So we don't get a lot of geologically, naturally occurring seismicity as opposed to other parts of the world that are more sort of located on those areas that are more susceptible to natural seismicity. However, we do find seismicity occurring in South Africa. So, for instance, the first event that you've referred to, that was as a result of natural seismicity. And then, there's geological controls that can contribute to those levels of seismicity. In the mining regions of South Africa, it's as I've explained, typically because of that induced process of seismicity that happens as a result of the mining process. But in formalized mining, I think over the last 2 or so decades, we've come a very long way, at least 3 decades perhaps even, in terms of understanding what can be done in terms of mining operations, to minimize the effects of those seismic events to occur. So adapting mining methods and implementing strategies to reduce that. Yeah. So that would be on active mining operations, yes.
How many seismic events do you guys monitor, say, on a weekly basis?
So we do find quite a bit of seismicity in the country across all of South Africa on a daily basis. There's anything between 10 and 30 earthquakes that happen. The vast majority of them are actually not really perceivable, that can be felt. They are of low magnitude. But over the last 10 years, maybe just as a point of reference, with our networks in the West Rand region, we've located about 140 earthquakes in the last 10 years. But those are typically your magnitude 3 and above size earthquakes. Okay. So the majority of those other earthquakes are smaller, so we don't expect damage from them. But if, residents are closer to the source, you can actually feel the vibrations. But it's not to say that it would necessarily cause, damage to infrastructure.
Okay. And then for people who live in mining areas, what protections do they need to put in place to be safe in an event that they experience an earthquake? Must they ensure their buildings are more structurally sound? What is it they need to do?
Yes, I think maybe as a sort of a two-pronged answer to your question, obviously in the immediate wake of an earthquake event happening, so if you're in the midst of a shaking, obviously the first thing is to get to a point of safety. So evacuate buildings, or if you can't find protection, underneath maybe tables or anything that can protect from anything that can possibly fall down. Because, usually we don't, in the midst of that, we can't anticipate, what's the worst that could happen. But then, once the shaking and that had subsided, then assessments can be done in terms of, were there any damage caused by earthquakes. From a planning perspective, generally in South Africa, we do have our building standards and building codes that do take into account the sort of framework of historical seismicity in the country. And then, that's where our engineers, structural and civil engineers come in to also make their contributions to make sure that at least in line of the threshold of seismicity that we do experience in these different parts of South Africa, that the designs and the construction activities that are undertaken are actually commensurate with the levels of seismicity that we'd expect. So that's ideally from a pre-construction point of view. Post-construction, there's not much that you can do except to ensure that point of safety in the event that seismic events do happen.
All right, Willem, thank you for making time for us.